Welcome back to Office Politics. I am your host, Jasmine Reed Clark, and this is the space where we talk about life after the offer letter. Today, I have on arguably my most important special host. We have the man behind the curtain, Jordan David Clark.
I don't want to brag, but I probably am the most important and the most special guest.
Definitely. I mean, without you, no one could hear my important ramblings to the world. Honestly, you feed my narcissism, so thank you very much. We have you on today because, well, actually for a multitude of reasons, but I recently redecorated our home for the 100th time, give or take? Yeah.
Give or take.
And in it, we found a key to an old office drawer, like a drawer I had at one of my actually at two of my last jobs. And we found that notebook that I would have when I was sad or mad or like anything other than thriving, which was often at my two employers. And I would jot down my golden nuggets to keep from, sending a passive aggressive email or just like rage quitting. And it was fun to kind of go through that. And then we thought, this would make for a great episode. So there are a few different pages we're going to go through. You have them dog-eared, and we're just going to talk through them. But before we get to that, in addition to being the most important guest, the legend, the machine, my husband, who are you, Jordan?
I just wanted to set the record straight. I am not a machine. And anyone who says
machines,
otherwise,
Jordan? Aren't we all robots at this point?
I'm also the host, co-host, and producer of a soon-to-be-released podcast called We Built It That Way with my friend and former co-worker, AJ Falver. I work in urban planning, ride my bike to work some days, and I am a kind of annoying person to go on a walk with.
Because he'll explain why we ... built it that way. Now, let's dive into this notebook, sir. What were some of the gems I
got
left?
It right here. Can you hear me? Is this good radio right here?
ASMR. Yes.
You want to hear the pages? Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
All right. I've got 10 things I want to cover with you.
Nice.
And I'm just gonna, I think the way we agreed to do this was I'll give you the prompts and you can tell me what you were thinking behind that.
Okay. Perfect.
And I think you mentioned that this was in that white filing cabinet. That was locked for like over a year. And then recently I found that it was unlocked. So I was like, oh, cool. It unlocks.
Yes.
All right. So let's unlock these golden nuggets of wisdom.
Mm-hmm. Let's put in some dreamy background music.
Yeah, that's a transition.
Job.
Okay. Number 1, don't waste your words on people who don't want to hear the truth.
Candidly, this could have been about a lot of things. But the thing that really, really comes to mind is, do you remember when I was first launching the DEI program at a tech startup? We're going to leave guilty and innocent will be left nameless. But
just look at our LinkedIn. You can figure it out.
Right. So, and I remember having to explain why a certain D&I program was important. And that one person, he just didn't care. And remember on the airplane, I was like, I get it now. I am over here busting my ass trying to convince someone why equity in the
boss of yours?
Yeah. Well, it was like an adjacent. Yeah.
Okay.
A leader, I had to work, a stakeholder. And I kept losing my mind. And do you remember, like, I joked in therapy, I've lost, like, I projected all of my daddy issues onto that person. Just being like, I just want you to say you're proud of me. But in this case, I just wanted him to be less racist, I guess, and just care more about Black people and equity at work. And it took me, I think, just losing a lot of sleep and a lot of tears and realizing that you cannot change everyone's mind. And maybe this happens in your industry too, with sustainability. It's like, you may never get to the heart of certain developers.
Hmm.
But then you have to realize you're not necessarily building it for them. And I know that's
Yeah.
what I had to get to was I'm putting together an ERG because I believe maybe person A over here doesn't get it, but person B, C, D, E, F, G need it, get it. And there's gonna be power in numbers. And
Yeah.
realizing like you can't make everyone happy, but also you can't make everyone see your point,
Mm-mm.
even when it's painfully obvious.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's something to be said for trying to plant in more fertile soil, right? Because like not everybody's going to see the beauty in the changes that you're hoping for.
Exactly. So, so I think the lesson really here is that train, you got to chug along, choo choo, beep beep, and realize that if people don't want to get on your train, leave them on the tracks.
Yeah. Also at a certain point it's like survival for you too. Like you got to preserve your energy for, the long road ahead. If it's something that's really important to you.
Yeah, word.
You also said something that was interesting about projecting like daddy issues onto somebody. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that it's probably like a good future episode just about like we all bring the issues
Yeah.
that we obtained through growing up in childhood to
Yes.
work. And the more like the sooner we realize that and then work on that, we could probably all have healthier experiences at work.
Boom. What is the next golden nugget I dropped in that notebook?
You are probably smarter than most people at the top.
Oh, yeah. I
Was that you talking to yourself or just
Yes.
okay? Because I agree with that.
um but okay, it's kind of like when you're young and you have to have that realization that your parents aren't superhuman and they're not Superman and they make mistakes just like you.
Yeah.
I think I had to go through that with executives in the C-suite. I thought they must be geniuses, and I'm sure some of them are, or some of them are incredibly gifted and talented within certain specializations. However, they're usually not the smartest person in the room. They might be the savviest person in the room, but once I was finally joining, albeit being a fly on the wall at times, but once I was joining that seat at the table, or I guess like really being a kid under the seat at the table, I realized like I'm just as smart as these people. I'm just as hardworking. It's that
Mm-hmm.
whole thing like Jeff Bezos doesn't work a gazillion times harder than
Yeah.
anyone. But even to like, I think scale it down and make it a more relatable example, the boss you have is likely just as intelligent as you are. Maybe they just have more experience, or they have better people skills, or they know how to see an opportunity and seize it, or see an opportunity and exploit it. Depends on
Yeah.
which company leader we're talking about. But that was a big lesson for me to learn. I'm not the dumbest person in the room just because I don't have a chief title.
Yeah. I think a lot of times the people in the room have ladder climbing skills
Yeah.
first and foremost, and that might not necessarily mean that they're the smartest or the most prepared. And I also don't know that it always matters if you're like super smart. 'Cause there's different ways of being smart or
Mm-hmm.
intelligent, and also sometimes they were just like in the right place at the right time. Like they got
Yeah.
there early enough, and
Mm-hmm.
they're just like there was like 3 people when it started, and now there's like 300, and they're just like still at the top, whether they belong there or not. So
Yeah. That's funny. Without saying names or giving too many details, there is someone at a former employer, and we would joke if they left that company today, they would be in for a rude awakening because
yeah,
they go into meetings and it's almost their shtick to be a brat and like throw things. And it's like, I mean, that's cool. And you probably saw that in like some movie with somebody portraying Mark Zuckerberg or something, but that's not real life. And please don't do that at your next employer.
all right, number 3, don't risk business and pleasure with friends you want to keep.
Yeah, this one is delicate. I was in a situation that a lot of the details around, but essentially I had to become a friend's spouse's boss. And I'm not here to really divulge the details of that particular situation, but I can say I walked away from it vowing I would never almost never, I should say, almost never work with a loved one again, or at least not in a space where there has to be a power dynamic. Because even like with you, remember when we were thinking about maybe working more closely together,
Hmm.
we wrote out, okay, I would
Yeah.
own this much of the company, and then you would own this, but you would specifically own this department,
Yeah.
and you would get the last say. Um, but I think with that particular thing, I lost a friendship, and that really sucked. And there's really no, it's so hard to define relationships and really put, I think, hard boundaries, especially with someone like me. I like struggle with boundary setting in general, and I know people do it, like Jack's wife Kim, who's been on the podcast.
Yeah.
Her and Miriam have their own fashion line, and they seem to do it really well, so it's not to say it can't be done. I just
Hmm.
don't think that's for me, and I think that I already lead with heart, empathy, and I'm more likely to be taken advantage of, or more likely to put assume a lot more accountability and
Yeah.
responsibility. So I don't think it's healthy for me to work with friends.
That's a really good point. I guess keeping in mind that these are written to you, and then for the listener, I guess to determine how much of you they see in themselves. Because,
Right.
like, yeah, I think the takeaway is like not necessarily that it's a bad idea to work with your friends or people who you're already close to, but like really have an understanding of how of like your own personality and the sensitivities that you might be bringing into it, and then like also how well you know and like interact with that friend. Is it somebody you've like worked on a lot of school projects before with, and you, because I can think of people from like grad school that I would actually work really well with, and I
Yeah.
can think of people from grad school who I would probably not work well with. you know.
And I also think you have to be honest about the friend or loved one that you're trying to work with. That particular situation I was in, when I look back in
Hmm.
retrospect, there were red flags just about communication style, and I maybe saw some of the writing on the wall, and I went into it blindly optimistic, or almost just like, I don't think this, because I even said to you, I was like, I don't think this is a great idea, but
Hmm.
I have to do this. And
Hmm.
I would, if I could do everything all over again, I'm grateful for the lesson, but I would say to someone, I don't think that dynamic is going to be healthy for our friendship. And to me,
Hmm.
that's more important. But let me see if I can help get this person a job elsewhere.
So can I put you on the spot really quick? And additionally to the ways that I'm already putting you on the
Ooh,
spot,
yes.
I don't have that like list with me. But when you talked about establishing boundaries about if we were going to work together,
Mm-hmm.
do you want to talk about maybe what a couple of those were if you and I were to be like fully or partly working on some projects together?
Yeah, I don't like have the list in front of me either, but I remember you would have owned a lot of the creative direction. So it would be at the, like, I would treat you like the CMO. And
Hmm.
so just like with a CEO and a CMO, it could say like, hey, these are our directives for the next quarter. And while, yeah, I mean, I guess a CEO, I could trump you, but more so what I would do is just, if you're like, no, I'm really passionate that we have to use mustard yellow instead of eggshell yellow, it'd be like, okay, like you are the CMO. That's ultimately your decision. And that's what we would have to establish up front. I remember that
Hmm.
being a big one of Jordan gets to own communications, marketing,
Hmm.
graphics, and I would get to own more so the overall vision. And then you would own project management, and you would get to decide what tools we got to use.
Uh-huh.
And we were just playing to each other's strengths ultimately.
Yeah. Do you have any other tips for people who are like in a relationship or just a friendship and they might want to work together?
My first thought is don't do it, but I mean to be more helpful. Almost treat it like a prenup. Like sit down like a marriage, and what happens if this, like, I think you have to go through every worst case scenario. And yes, I do think you should put it in writing. And I've even heard of business partners going to therapy together. So I think if you and
Oh yeah.
I were um in business together on a more official level outside of you like editing the podcast,
Uh-huh.
maybe there is I was going to say occupational therapist, that's totally different, but we
It
would
sounds
go
right though.
to a someone who could help us through that communication
Hmm.
barrier, or a leadership coach essentially. And I also think that's where it might be helpful to have odd numbers. So maybe there is like we have a third party, but then that might also get tricky too, where it's like, I can't believe, person C took Jordan's side and not mine, So that's a whole
Mm-hmm.
nother thing to unpack. But keeping it
Yep.
fair, go through the worst case scenarios, put everything in writing, and really ask yourself, if I lost this friendship, would I think it was all worth it? Because I think that is a gamble you're taking.
Yeah. So let's go to number 4. Most people want to throw money at a problem, not actually fix a problem.
Oh, this just goes for life too. You're probably like, is this about our home decor buying?
Well,
Maybe. I know I felt this way a lot when working on diversity issues and feeling like people are so quick to put resources behind optics, but God forbid they actually rebuild the infrastructure and treat the actual problem. We always want to throw money at symptoms, and it doesn't make sense. Why the fuck are you going to put a big band-aid on a broken levee? Like, rebuild that shit, re-engineer that shit. And
mm-hmm.
that made me mad, because it's like, the amount, by the time we're done putting money, resources, and energy towards the band-aid, we could have like repurposed the bandage. We could have healed the wound. And I know that comes up a lot for you in your industry with greenwashing. Yeah. Like, how do you feel about that?
On the one hand, I think it's a positive thing that doing things in a sustainable way and building resilience for the future is like cool now.
Yeah.
Those are at least words that aren't a huge turnoff, whereas they used to be. But that also brings problems. I guess it's the same thing with like anything in the, well, it was diversity, then it was diversity and inclusion now, and then justice and equity are the new add-ons. And with that, is the difficult thing that's like oftentimes just marketing language.
Yeah.
And even worse than that, sometimes it's like being self-deluded that you're doing something that has more value than it actually has. What concerns me is sometimes when I see responses to problems that are like applying a new coat of paint when you really need a new foundation.
Exactly.
And yeah, it's obviously a lot more work and it's a lot of headaches, and you might even need like outside help to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And it is certainly not going to look good in the quarterly earnings cycle, but you're talking about setting up for the future, for like not just for the future, but like for a better future.
And it also just feels much more scalable to, and like you said, it is as I learned from one of my clients, a pitta, a pain in the ass in the moment. Such a great acronym. Wish I had it sooner. But yeah, it's frustrating in the moment, and it's going to be frustrating probably for the first year or several, because you also have to clean up the shit that you had been putting off for years. But isn't it better to just figure it out now? It's almost like, I had to figure out bookkeeping for my business. Is it a headache? Hell yeah. Is it all? Yeah, but I'd rather figure it out now while I'm making X gross income versus, by the grace of God, I hope I'm like tripling my income.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Number 5, you will always regret the passive aggressive email. Always.
Mic drop. I have nothing to add to that, really. I've never gotten, even in the moments when it feels satisfying, either the repercussions were never worth what I did, or I truly feel like an asshole afterwards, or I just cringe on it years later. And if nothing else, and this is completely self-serving, I need that person to like introduce me to someone, or I've like burned a bridge and I'm like, oof, that was not worth it. But I've gotten a lot better at stopping myself. I've had enough crappy bullshit moments that I regret. And now I do the like 24-hour or it's so old school, but I think if this email was printed on the front of the newspaper,
or I don't know,
Times, or maybe the front of Instagram. So would I want this to be turned into like an inspirational Instagram quote? And if the answer is no, I try to sit on it and then figure out a much more mature way to get my same point across, but do it in a mature fashion. But you are the more calm, cool, collected one out of the two of us. Is this something you've ever even had to grow, mature in?
I have not had too many difficult coworkers.
But also, you're very direct at work. like you don't, and I don't, I mean, we could blame this on like who, like nature versus nurture, but I also don't think you feel the pressure to sugarcoat things.
I really try to tailor it to who I'm talking with. I'm not afraid to give direct feedback, but I do make an effort to not have it come off as just like pointlessly critical.
Right.
What I was going to say was that I think a good rule of thumb is like ask yourself what is the response I hope to get from this, and like if you come up with a good answer from your passive aggressive email, like I don't really know what the intended response is.
Well,
But
I
you're
think
probably not
it's
going to get it.
the intended infliction because you're like, oh, they hurt people. So you've
Yeah.
pissed me off. So I'm going to write something really snarky back to you
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to make you question all your life decisions. But that's like so rarely what's going to
Well, I
happen.
think sometimes the hope is that they see that they were being mean and that you being kind of passive aggressive about it will like open up their eyes. But probably the more likely thing to do that is like a very kindly worded email.
Yeah. Kill him with kindness.
Just don't kill them. But if you want to, do it with kindness. Number 6, promotions are popularity contests, and awards are pleas to get A players to stay.
Oh, I know exactly what I was thinking of when I wrote this. Okay, y'all want some straight up tea? Jordan, are you ready to
Yeah,
steep this tea?
spill the tea.
All right, clean up on aisle
Pour the tea.
7. Pour the tea.
Steep the tea.
So I did, we had to do like an end of year award thing for a past employer, and no joke. First of all, that shit is like half rigged anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it was because we knew someone was interviewing elsewhere. So we thought, oh, let's just give them this really nice award and we'll butter them up and we'll keep them
Did it
longer.
work?
No, I mean, it worked for like another quarter and then they ended up leaving. But it was a way to get people to shut up and smile. And then I think most of us know that promotions are popularity contests. And I'm someone who has been promoted, and I do
Mm.
know that extroverts have it easier at work. Actually, I
Yeah.
want to get your opinion on that because I'm someone I've been able to literally profit off of being extroverted, or at least having really high social skills.
Yeah.
And I do know that I had it a lot easier than some people on my team who were likely smarter, savvier, more hardworking, but
Mm-hmm.
they didn't understand how to like ask someone how their weekend
Mm-hmm.
was.
Yeah.
And they didn't really know. They were playing checkers, not chess in a way. So, how do you feel about that? Being someone who isn't going out of their way to go to every happy hour and sugarcoat things.
No, I mean it's obviously not fair. Like I think companies should have a very transparent process for when raises are considered and
Mm-hmm.
kind of like what you can expect. And it would be awesome if raises and promotions were like done on a schedule that like everybody understood and could
And they are supposed to
form
be. I
expectations.
think
Yeah.
where it gets a little bit hairy is you'll have these scales, but then the scales are bullshit. Like I remember
Hmm.
my manager, and again I benefited from this, he gave everyone, like, so 4 was the highest you could give. He gave everyone 4s. Every now and again he gave out a 3.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew another manager on a different team who only gave out 2s and would give
Mm-hmm.
out 3s rarely. And then he would give out 1 for a year. Like he didn't believe in just handing out 3s and 4s.
Yeah.
So on paper, I was getting my raise because it looked like I was exceeding expectations, whereas someone on a different team was absolutely meeting and exceeding expectations, but this person just came from a more militant background and was much more conservative with the numerical system. And we would even give out, hey, this is what a 1 means, a 2, a 3, a 4. But at the end of the day, perception is reality. So there's
Mm-hmm.
still a dimension in which performance reviews aren't fair, even when you try very, very hard to make them transparent.
All right. Number 7 on our list is don't make work your identity.
I think it'd be interesting to kind of let you riff here for a little bit because you met me back when I was still working in social media. We met in April 2016. And you saw me not only switch industries a few times, but work at different employers. You saw me or you've seen me lose myself after being
Mm-hmm.
laid off. Walk me through what it was like to see your partner's self-worth live on a sliding scale based off of their work performance.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, first of all, work for a lot of people is going to be at least a big part of their lives, and a part of their lives that will give value and purpose. Like, it can be, it doesn't have to be. And a lot of people aren't lucky enough for that to be the case, but it's okay if like you get some excitement from the work that you do. And but the danger is if you get too invested in like how things are going at work. There's just a lot of things you can't control, and a lot of like bullshit
Mm-hmm.
that you have to deal with, and a lot of personalities. And we've talked already about like all of the things that you didn't realize were like popularity contests and so on. And so it's just out of your hands in a lot of ways. And so like with you, or with anybody who's really overly wrapped up in their work, with you at that time, right? Not now. But it would be like something great would happen at work and you were like on top of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that was awesome. And it was like great to be around you, and like, we would go celebrate or whatever. And the flip side is like also when things are going bad at work, then that's also your whole world. And like it kind of didn't matter what else was going on, that you just felt like crappy, and like all this extra work I've been doing doesn't even matter.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really important, to do our best to live a well-rounded life. And life has more dimensions to it than the professional stuff.
Yeah.
And, I'd like our particular part of the world to have work make up a smaller piece of that pie, obviously. But yeah, there's certainly a danger in these kinds of jobs where like you're doing your passion, in air quotes.
And to kind of go back to what we were speaking about at the beginning with like your daddy issues show up, and all of your childhood trauma is projected into the work you do or how you handle work. So I could answer the question, why did I make work my identity for such a long season of life? And I know remnants of it are still a part of my life today. And I can really look at how, success was treated growing up. You got if you got good grades and you got straight A's, you were rewarded.
Mm-hmm.
If my mom was able to brag on me at her next social event, I was a good kid.
Mm-hmm.
So it follows you. So I can kind of point and show you where I went quote unquote wrong, where there
Yeah.
were cracks in my foundation. So where did you, whether it's quote unquote going right, or where were you able to cultivate the kind of self assurance so that you didn't need a job or a title or a salary number to define who you were and how you saw yourself?
You're asking that me personally? I'm
Yeah, I
I'm
mean, at
I'm
least
not.
when I knew you, you never were like, you just, you had such a healthier relationship with work.
Hmm. I'm not sure I'm as good at this as you think, but part of it was like just finding things outside of work that made me really happy and really content, and developing habits and leisure activities, I guess, that were not expensive. For one, like a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the things I used to do are free or really cheap.
Yeah.
And they're things I can do for the rest of my life and like just keep enjoying. And I'm interested in a lot of things that don't always have to do with my work. And so sometimes I get home and I'm just looking forward to doing something else, and I try to make friends so that they're also a part of my life.
It sounds like you created an identity literally outside of work.
Yeah,
What an
I guess I
idea.
never like. I'm having trouble coming up with the answer just because
No,
like
I
I don't
actually
spend a lot of
think,
time thinking about it.
because it does come naturally to you, but that also makes a lot of sense. I'm someone, and we've talked about this, I
Hmm.
made all of my friends at work, which is why I worked a lot harder after I
Yeah.
left the ad agency to have friends from different walks
Hmm.
of life and join different organizations, because I felt it was almost like a divorce when I left
Yeah.
a company. I'm like, oh my God, I can't
Uh
take
huh.
the kids with me, or we have like visitation. And you are so great at finding friends at Trader Joe's and the coffee shop.
Hmm.
And I think that you're very, I don't even think you're intentional, because I just think this is inherently who you are. But you I don't think there's a switch for you. I think I go on and off. And so when I go to the coffee shop, I'm very pleasant, of course, to everyone around me. But I don't think I'm as open-minded thinking, oh, this
Yeah.
person might be interesting to talk to. Like you met a guy who is a civil engineer this morning at the coffee shop. And I'm like,
My
I
arch nemesis
probably,
in the field of
yeah.
urban planning.
But I'm just like, I probably wouldn't have even started a conversation with the person behind me.
Well, I think it's also maybe like a temperament thing as much as anything, because like I never was really jealous of like the person at like a hot shot like job. I would be more interested in like the life that person was living, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so like when I after college I went and taught English in Spain, and like I was leading a pretty low ambition life, I guess you could have said, because I was teaching English 4 days a week, and then I had long weekends and I traveled and just hung out. But that was like awesome to me. I felt like I was living a full life. And I remember a friend of mine when I was there, she was like looking at all of her like former classmates from college, and they're doing all these like impressive things. Like their resume looked really impressive. And I was like, I mean, I don't know. I think I think you're doing the cool thing by having like a, you know, enjoyable life.
Yeah.
So
There's something there about holistic wellness and maybe not categorizing or compartmentalizing
mhm.
our lives so much and adding metrics to it. But there's definitely a fluidity to your life of, I think you live a very vibrant life. And some people, like people would look at your life and see a lot of routine, but there's a lot of vibrancy there because you are able to fully focus on whatever it is you're doing.
I also think that one of the things I've always thought about is like trying to reverse engineer like a life that you want. So like you might want a certain job, but then the life that that gives you is like, well, you're working 80-hour weeks
Mm-hmm.
and you have to be in the car another 20 hours.
Yeah.
And like that's just not, I don't care how cool the job is. It's for me that's like not a, it's not a good endpoint. So
Well, that goes back to when I had to do the 4-hour work week challenge for the financial diet. And it was after the Tim Ferriss book. And long story short, if you were to break down, like the person who makes 100K a year, but they work 100
mm-hmm,
hours, they make X amount. And then the person who makes 60K a year, who works,
mm-hmm,
I don't know, like 20 hours a week, really that person is quote unquote more rich, but
mm-hmm.
also they probably are having a more fulfilling life.
Yeah. I also want to say like this is not something that probably somebody working at like pick your like bullshit job,
Mm-hmm.
probably not something that a lot of people struggle with. Probably a lot of people want it to be less of their life, just like time wise,
Yeah, word.
but are in no danger of making it their like identity. Okay, we should move on. Number 8 is people will get away with stealing your ideas.
You know what? I'm not even going to be bashful about this. I won't say the company because, you know, defamation. But I was working, this is back when I was working in social media. And technically, I do know we signed so like an NDA or like an agreement about if you come up with an idea, it is technically the company's intellectual property, which I
Uh-huh.
totally understand. But the fact that they straight up used it, and I think they even pitched it for a Super Bowl commercial, and it just later ended up being their spring campaign. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like, you know, you could float a girl a text, you could float a girl a check because you built a whole campaign around my idea right before I left. But then someone else, my manager, just got all the credit for it. And I want to be clear in case she ever can connect dots and listen to this. I learned a lot from her, and I do think overall she was a good manager. But if she had any flaws, it was the minute you started to outshine her, she was like, don't forget who's queen bee in this bitch. So just know people will steal your ideas. So put that shit in writing all of the time. And truly, I think I just had to come to grips with that shit is going to happen. And you can't, which kind of goes back to why you can't derive a lot of your self worth from work. Because
Yeah.
I remember feeling so crummy when I saw it air and I saw the script and realized and seeing directed by, and I'm like, motherfucker. But and I think I would still be pissed today, but knowing that you have to stay true to your mission. Understand you are going to meet people who will backstab you. Remember, that was a hard thing for me to learn. I've
Yeah.
come home crying to you so many times because I'm like, oh my God. Like, it's almost funny now, but I remember crying to you and the lights were out. And I was like, people just, they don't do things because it's the right thing to do. And really realizing
Mm-hmm.
that having empathy is not inherent among everyone you meet. And I know I had to learn for so many people, work is a place where relationships are transactional, and that isn't how I operate or move. And that was really hard for me to navigate. That to other people, you are a vehicle to get from point A to point B.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And I think it also taught you, like, there's always lessons for the future from there. Not just that, like, oh, the world sucks and is unfair and people are shitty sometimes, but also like, if you're ever to like a point where you can have, your own organization, now you know what it feels like to have that happen to you, and so you're going to be on the lookout. And
oh, well, I
ultimately, if
brought
you
it
need to
in back when I
manage
was
people,
people managing at
yeah,
the tech startup. I was very clear to say, like, this was so and so's idea. And I would even,
yeah, that costs nothing.
yeah, it cost nothing. Well, and I would even pull that person. I remember we had a meeting with the CPO, and I was someone's manager. I'll call her Kay. I don't think she'd care if I said her name, but I'll call her Kay. And I was like, hey, to the CPO, is it okay if Kay presents this to you? Because at the end of the day, it was her idea. And she's like, yeah, that's a
Mm-hmm.
great idea. And then she got face to face time.
Yeah,
I'm still her manager. So guess what?
yeah,
I'm
you
still
still look
gonna
good.
get that shine. Like, y'all need to realize there's enough shine to go around.
Uh-huh.
But even if there wasn't, just, are you that, like, you can't be so threatened that you're not gonna help other people or not let other people get their
Yeah,
moment when they can.
yeah, that's a miserable way to operate. Let's move on to number 9. Being fired doesn't mean you're a swear word incoming. Fuck up. Just like a breakup doesn't mean you're unlovable.
Yeah, you've seen me get fired and think my life was destined to nothing and crumbs. But I
Mm-hmm.
actually just did a happy hour with a career coach, Catalina, and I'll put her stuff in the show notes. And it was just like a getting to know you. And she and I both have been fired, and she's been fired 3 times, let go once. And we were both saying that is probably one of the things all entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs, have in common. And sometimes you are going to get fired because people are jealous of you, because people think you occupy too much space. Or sometimes it's a simple, it's not a fit. And it's okay that it's not a fit. Like, you and I could never do the same job because we have 2 totally different sets of strengths. But that doesn't make me or you any less valuable to a company. We just have different value adds. And I didn't
Mm-hmm.
understand that for a very long time. And even when I was at that tech startup, I wasn't fired, but I remember being way more successful in 2 other roles. And then the role I was in towards the end, I wasn't successful in it. And I harbored a lot of resentment and self hatred because I saw myself failing.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't healthy for a lot of reasons, but I also was telling myself a narrative that wasn't true.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot of reasons you could get fired. Sometimes it's just like a dumb thing, right? Like they're jealous of you or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. But sometimes it's just, yeah, it's like okay to get feedback like that. Like if you consider it a failure, like actually sometimes failure is okay and it teaches us
Mm-hmm.
about ourselves, and it maybe teaches us like what we're not, yeah, like you're saying, not a good fit, or maybe it can be a break that you really needed and it's hard to see it from immediate circumstances, but it tells you like, okay, well, clearly that wasn't like natural for me, so let me
Yeah.
try something a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. And you don't want to be any place that doesn't serve you. Easier said than done, but
Mm-hmm.
in the end, I can truly look back at every place that I've left for one reason or another. And at best, I felt I fulfilled my purpose during that time. And at the worst, I just got, I was put out of my own misery.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that being fired is really shitty. really shitty, especially because we don't have like a very good social safety net, but also not the end of the world
Yeah. Oh, and if you're fired,
career
make sure
wise.
that you understand your rights. So if you're full time, make sure that you're getting all of your unused PTO. You should be paid out for that. You should also look at your benefits. Please talk to an HR professional and see what your options are with unemployment. So just had to put that in there.
Speaking of HR,
Oh, God.
and potentially contradicting your previous statement, let's get to number 10. HR is not your friend. I repeat, HR is not your friend.
Listen, and I learned this lesson when I was in HR. And because, I was working at the tech startup and I was a quasi HR manager in the interim while we got our shit together. And once we hired some true HR professionals with tenure and much more experience, one of them took me aside and she literally said, "You are too passionate about people. We are not here to be people's friends,
Mm-mm,
therapists, or advocates. We
mm-mm.
are here to protect the company. And if you really want to be successful in this industry, you should realize that now." And it's like that weird moment of thanks thanks for the honesty. Truly, I appreciate it. It was a little bit like finding out Santa Claus isn't real, but
Yes.
it is something that everyone needs to know. And whether or not you agree with that, because I have some HR friends who totally stand by that statement and think it should be that way. And then you have people like me and, my best friend who, Ellen won't care if I'm like, Ellen's one of the good ones if you work with Ellen. But then you have the good guys, so to speak, who were like, wait, that seems completely counterintuitive to have that mindset, but it's an important lesson to learn. So just know nothing is truly off the record. And that is truly, like, there are very good reasons that things can't be completely off the record. Things are not completely off the record. Things can impact you and come up later. People do
Mm-hmm.
not have tight lips. I'm telling you, we always joke it's the legal, finance, and HR team, all the biggest alcoholics, all the biggest partiers, and the biggest shit talkers sometimes. So just be careful with what you tell HR and understand that at the end of the day, the company's bottom line is their top priority. And
Mm-hmm.
even if you get to work with one of the good ones like me or Ellen, we still understand that principle. So when we are operating, we have to remember that our bosses need to know about the bottom line, and then we try to squeeze in our little passion projects like DEI initiatives in the
Yeah.
meantime.
Right. Just think about the term human resources, right? There's like all these different resources that go into making your product or getting your service out the door. And the humans are a part of that. So, okay, well, we got to make sure like cover our ass on the human front.
Yeah,
Like it is good for people to realize that they are at the service of the company and the ownership and
right.
not the employees.
And again, you may disagree with that philosophy, you may totally agree with it, but nonetheless, just remember, if you need someone to talk to, have a support
Uh-huh.
system in your personal life that you can go to. And if you are fortunate enough to have someone you can trust at work, then, and if anything, your manager, if you have a good relationship with your manager, is more likely to watch your back than
Yeah.
HR. And know that HR really is there, though, to answer all of your nitty gritty questions about internal transfers, career trajectory, compensation plans.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you are worried about, what's my next move? Not only should you be talking to your manager, that is a great time to talk to HR because it is their responsibility to explain things to you.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, like you said, this is more like a discussion of like structurally that's what HR is there for, but obviously like it's like a department that draws a lot of like more sociable
mm-hmm.
types. So
Yeah.
it's probably peopled with a lot of good individuals.
Oh, absolutely. But yeah. But those are my nuggets. Any more nuggets, Jordan?
Um you should unionize your job if that's an option for you.
Should I unionize my job as a solo entrepreneur?
I think if you are going to add people to it, you should pursue like a worker ownership model.
Nice. I like it.
because I think we should have democratic say so at our work.
I like it. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Jordan. It was nice to take a humid stroll down memory lane.
Did you say a humid stroll?
Yes, it's very humid out.
Yeah, it is.
And career stuff usually brings up feelings of sweat and perspiration. So,
Well, you're welcome, and this has been a lot of fun.
yeah. Well, while we have you, you're this mystery character. You have your own fan base. Some people are big fans of Jordan. They love when you make a good Instagram story cameo. Anything you want to say to your people, your fans?
This what's going on. Love you.
That is Jordan David Clark, the machine.
Not my nickname.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us. I would absolutely love it if you left comments or slid into my DMs telling me what are the lessons you had to learn the hard way and which ones did I learn that you had to learn. And if you liked today's episode, please make sure that you are following Office Politics on Instagram and leave us a review or 5-star rating or 4-star rating. You know, we appreciate candor.
And share an episode with your friends. That's usually what I ask people to do on my shows.
Okay. Yes, please share with your friends. Not HR, just your friends.
Share with HR too. You can be friends with HR people.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, it's like probably some of the best people to make friends with.
All right. Well, I love you for being on, and I love you in general. And let's go for a walk.
All right. I love you for being
All right.
you.
Okay. Bye.